welcome everybody who's here for our workshop discussion today. It's going to be a presentation at the start, and then we're going to have a little discussion, and we welcome you to put your comments in the chat box as we go along, or questions, and then when we're done with our brief presentations, we'll move into a discussion mode, and that's, hopefully we'll be able to hear from you about these topics. So our topic for today is It's Nowhere or Nothing If Not Open, Successful Scholarship in the Time of Pandemic. So basically what we're focusing on is the word open, open everything, and what's happened especially due to the time we are now in COVID-19. So let's introduce ourselves. Julia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julia Galtan. I'm the Applied Sciences and Engineering Librarian at the University of California at Irvine, and I'm active in the AAAS. I was named a fellow last year, so I'm very proud of that. And I am quite engaged in the open movements and promoting open science, and I'm going to share a little bit about how that fits in with other aspects of the other programmatic aspects of openness, and hope that you'll share your experiences as we move through this. So I look forward to my comments later.
And I'm Laura Mullen. I'm the longtime science librarian at Rutgers University. I think I always say I've been a science librarian since before the internet, so I've seen this transformation that right now seems to be accelerating even faster than ever before. And I'm a subject specialist, but I'm also an open access specialist for Rutgers. So my role is to take in all the questions and work on open access policy and things like that. So I'm also a member of AAAS, and I usually attend the AAAS annual meeting and really enjoy my engagement with AAAS. So Julie and I also represent very large research institutions that are working on a lot of open initiatives. I'm going to focus on the global imperative for open access. Of course, we're at a human rights conference. Our topic fits right in with this very easily. Again, the current pandemic that we're in only amplifies the need for us to focus on the need for open and everything. And so I'm going to focus basically on scholarly publishing and the open access side of things and kind of what's happening. And Julie is going to move after that to focusing on other aspects of open science beyond that, and how that framework promotes diversity, inclusion, and equity among all partners while stimulating innovation and entrepreneurship and working in a collaborative and open ecosystem. And again, if it's not open now, it is really not, it's not where we want to be. So our whole focus again is on moving toward open. Switch. So as many of you know, we're celebrating International Open Access Week this week. So we're very happy to be doing this presentation right in time for Open Access Week. And for the third year in a row, International Open Access Week has focused on this topic of taking action to build structural equity and inclusion and open with purpose. And taking a 3-year approach to this has really allowed people to think about this from a time of action. It's no longer time for thinking, it's time to actually change the paradigms that are there. So next slide. And we start with the definition of open access. Basically, the question comes, what do you mean when you talk about open access? And starting in about 2002, the Budapest Open Access Initiative is probably the definition that's most often referred to. And this is a definition that's expansive. It talks about open access, not just making stuff free, but also the ability to reuse and remix and build and innovate on top of existing scholarship. But however, we consider free to read is thought by many as a place to start. So if we can't get to full reuse rights on scholarship, which is the part that I'm talking about, we at least want everything that's produced to be free to read by a global readership. Next slide. So again, open access, we're looking at it today. Open access is a human right. And we have some things to point to here. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, spearheaded by Eleanor Roosevelt. And we have there, what we're going to point to is Article 27. And this quote that everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts, and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. And the scientific advancement part is, of course, the imperative here today, and in terms of the pandemic. And then the Sustainable Development Goals, which there are 17, and where open access fits into those. It's felt that open access fits into about 10 of the 17 goals, and there's people that have, of course, flesh that out more than we will today. But today we're looking at thinking about target 10 and goal 16, which would be to ensure public access to information and protect fundamental freedoms in accordance with national legislation and international agreements. And open access, again, it's really the basic, really at its base is the ability for people to have access to scientific literature and the products of research. Also, UNESCO has a focus on open access and has for quite some time. Next slide. And this is basically the UNESCO statement on open access. And you see the symbol there, which if you've been involved in Open Access Week this week, you've seen that symbol everywhere. That's the international symbol for open access. And UNESCO here describes their position on open access, something about the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is basically, again, the bedrock of moving the whole world toward a more equitable knowledge ecosystem. Next slide. So just a couple of quotes here taken from the LSE Impact of Social Sciences blog recently. And basically, number one, COVID-19 has highlighted the need to work with researchers around the world at the same time that it's also exposed the inequalities in the global research and knowledge system. And the COVID-19 crisis has confirmed that a strong knowledge system is key to a just, peaceful, and sustainable world. And these are aspirational statements, but it's what we really are thinking about, especially this week, in terms of what are these inequities and what can we do to move forward from that. Next slide. And of course, when we talk about inequities, some inequities in the scholarly communication landscape have been and continue to be exacerbated by the pandemic. And, we're familiar with a lot of these. This is just a short list. There's many, many more. So in terms of inequity and discipline, so much focus on biomedicine at this time. And you see, huge numbers of articles coming out, funding being supporting biomedical research. But we are concerned about other areas that do also need to be looked at. Psychology, sociology, many, many others that, are areas of interest during the pandemic that may not be supported at the highest level they should. The usual inequity, digital access and infrastructure. It's fine to say that everyone should have access to the information they need, but we know right now there's no office support, IT, and the usual adequate broadband and other considerations there. There's been the ability to secure funding for research is an inequity around the world, of course, always supporting more higher impact scientists and works and Northern voices. There's a lack of access to all important local voices. And that, of course, we're in a global pandemic. And so the local voices and, this is in a very important time to make sure that this information is discoverable and also available to everyone, not just, again, the Northern voices. In terms of gender, women in studies have reported a greater disruption to their studies and research during this time. And this is an area of concern. And the usual geographical, the richer countries, the North dominates and other perspectives and places are not being heard. And all language outside besides English is left out in general of a lot of aspects of the scholarly communication system. And again, the article this is from is Inequitable Knowledge Systems Before, During, and Beyond the Pandemic. And this comes from INASP, and INASP is an international developmental organization with nearly 30 years of experience working with a global network of partners in Africa, Latin America, and Asia, with a focus on this equitable knowledge ecosystem and building it and continuing to build it. Next slide. So the rise of open access. Open access has been on the rise for many years, and those of us in libraries started noticing this quite a long time ago. And those people in STEM fields, of course, with archive, 30 years of archive now since 91. We've noticed this move toward open access for a long time, but it still was kind of a peripheral thing. And what has happened with COVID is a total acceleration and disruption of the system. But the number of, the push for open access is all of a sudden stronger than ever before. And the flip to open access has been predicted, but back when this article was written, The Inevitability of Open Access by David Lewis, was in 2012. And back then, this was, again, a little bit on the fringes, but at that time, they were predicting this flip from a traditional scholarly publishing model to open access happening around this time and conservatively by 2025. And we actually see this starting to happen. Next slide. And there, many people follow this. This is just one of the blogs, Imaginary Journal of Poetic Economics from Heather Morrison, Dr. Heather Morrison. And this is one of the tracking tools that tracks the dramatic growth of open access. This is the most recent one. And I know this slide is hard to read, but you can see that there's just a huge, whether it's journals or open access materials in PubMed, or for instance, BASE, which is a large search engine for repositories, is now past a milestone of 250 million documents. So this, whether it's the journals route or the repositories, we're just seeing, just to point out that we're just seeing a massive increase in open access material that's available around the world. Next. So who is doing open access? Who must do open access? So making articles open access is the responsibility of every author. So if you look at it from situating it with the author, that responsibility, there's a lot more chance that it'll be successful. And most authors, in my experience anyway, want to make their articles available for visibility and for worldwide dissemination. And so the responsibility does belong with every author and every work. And there's a way to make almost every article open access. And we always tell people, don't leave this to your funder, your university, or your publisher. It's something that really resides with the author. And we do a lot of consultation, but there's consultation available on how to make your works open access, available from librarians, but also from many others, and plenty of material online. So when you share your work with the world, you watch your impact grow. Next slide. And this is just Julie and I, again, just mentioning that we are at institutions that have robust open access policies. And this is something that in North America, I know there's more than 115 universities now that have open access policies. And this is just a picture of the passage of the open access policy at my own institution. This is the University Senate. 220 plus members voting for an open access, voting on a resolution to pass an open access policy, meaning that they want to make their work open access and to help that be facilitated. So both the University of California and the Rutgers libraries have very similar types of open access policies. And they are based on a Harvard model, and this is something that we work on. It allows us to spend time working with people on doing open access. Next slide. And again, the funders are the other big, this is the other big movement over time. Funders, whether they're public or private, the list grows longer every day, really mandate and demand that that research outputs that are funded by taxpayer funding or private funding need to make those materials available to the world. And so this is another UNESCO website that shows where, all the regions of the world where funders are mandating this. And there used to be not as much compliance issue with this, but if you don't make your work open access now, you won't get any more funding from that organization, and they will come after you to do that. So there's a lot more teeth in these mandates now, and it's another huge growth area for open access. Next. So the game changer we're going to talk about today, and maybe some of you have used the preprint system, but the exponential growth and impact of preprints in the pandemic. So in terms of biomedical preprints, meaning unrefereed early versions of scholarly research, successes and some challenges in the time of COVID-19. And we'll focus on two big preprint servers, BioArchive and MedArchive. You'll notice their similarity to the original archive, which is mainly high energy physics in its early years. So this material is from an article that's just came out called Open Science Saves Lives, and this is part of our message today. And so you'll see the numbers. When it comes to COVID, there's been from December 31st to August 10th, 80,000 peer-reviewed articles and preprints just focusing on COVID. And in these preprint servers, in fact, the one that I was looking at this morning, 68% of all MedArchive papers are related to COVID for this time period. So for MedArchive, there were only from July to December last year, in that 6 months, only 807 preprints. But from January to June in 2020, in those 6 months, 6,771 preprints for a 739% increase in deposit of preprints. So of course we have positives and we have controversy. The positives are, of course, the timely communication of research results. There is just a mad acceleration, a mad dash to get all research results that could possibly help in any aspect of COVID-19 research. And it allows time stamping of findings too. They used to worry about preprints because it was considered prior publication and journals wouldn't produce them. But now your name is on that and it timestamps the findings as yours. So it's a way to get early credit for that. Allows feedback, fosters collaboration, and builds on existing research. Of course, we know the controversies too, widely quoting of unrefereed articles in the news media, possible inaccurate or unreliable findings, and especially in medical areas, this is really problematic. And many preprints are never accepted by a peer-reviewed journal. So it's a step along the way, and it's now a more accepted step along the way, but it's a smaller percentage that ever actually end up in a peer-reviewed journal. Next slide. So just to mention, here's MedArchive here. You can see the supporters, the funders, Cold Spring Harbor, BMJ, and Yale on this one, with other funding, Chan Zuckerberg and all. But this one, you'll see the warning on there. This article is a preprint, has not been peer-reviewed. They explain what peer-reviewed means. It reports new medical research that has yet to be evaluated, should not be used to guide clinical practice. And we know the hydroxychloroquine, the hydroxy, that study that came out that has caused a huge problem in the news media. And so next slide. So MedArchive is the big problem. BioArchive has fewer preprints, of course, about COVID than, well, there's the split there. Almost 10,000 articles, 7,667 are in MedArchive and only 2,097 in BioArchive, just because of the difference in focus of the two preprint servers. But there's your big yellow banner again there too. That's basically BioArchive is receiving many new papers on coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2. A reminder, these are preliminary reports and have not been peer reviewed. They should not be regarded as conclusive, guide clinical practice or health-related behavior, or to be reported in news media as established information. So they're putting this banner on everything in there, and but there's still some controversy. Next slide. What's happening is now there are services being built on top of the preprint servers. So this is the biggest one, COVID-19, which is the COVID-19 Open Research Data Set. And this is, Allen Institute for AI. This is a, it's a pulling together of all of the research and cherry picking some of the best, and also allows people to build apps for data visualization and other services on top of this data set. So this is a huge initiative that is really making a difference. Next. We're also seeing the development of overlay journals. So this is MIT's just announced this week, Rapid Reviews. COVID-19 is an open access overlay journal. So again, they're using the preprints as the corpus of material and choosing from that to peer review and publish in rapid reviews. So this is another thing. We saw this with Archive, but we're seeing this here now, and this is adding that extra layer of peer review to it. Next slide. Now, as we know, we talked about preprints, but scholarly journals, many challenges here. This could be an entire day of presentations just on what's happening in the journal landscape, because it is a huge, changing, transformative, complex situation. So journals have been making the move to open access for some time now, and there's many business models. They all have interesting names. There's a lot of complexity, but where's the money and who's going to pay? So authors need to pay to publish in most cases for open access publishing in journals, and that's where inequities are, many inequities. So the problem is APCs, article processing charges, don't work for many regions of the world, of course, and you know, flipping from universities paying to APCs is causing a lot of inequities. Commercial publishing is evolving, but is still limited globally. And there's no one size fits all in terms of disciplines for open access. So we have kind of, you know, the STEM model on one side, and then humanities and social sciences, some social sciences, you know, have other issues. So you really need to know your discipline's conventions, and then everyone needs to surface the problems and change the aspects that don't promote inclusion. So we have a tension in the open access system now between open, community-based infrastructure and commercial publishing and how it all fits together. And in some regions of the world, Latin America is very focused on open infrastructure, and that's moving forward very strongly there. And you know, it's again, there's another whole large discussion there. And actually, in some areas of the world, subscription journals work better for authors because authors are not funded to publish in most areas of the world. So of course, in a subscription journal, you don't have to pay to publish. Next slide. This is just a map of the Research for Life regions. Research for Life is a publisher initiative where publishers allow free access to you know, to all of the major scholarly journals that are published pretty much now, to areas that would not normally have access to those journals. But there's a bit of a different paywall situation happening now because author pays the actual, so you can have access to journals, but to actually publish in them is now going to cost you money. So they do have waivers in those countries, but this is a conversation. It's you know, ongoing, and you know, everybody. It's a multi-stakeholder conversation right now. Next slide. So, and it's not only articles and preprints now. We've seen an exponential growth and a huge movement toward open access monographs. And if articles can be open access, why can't books? And so this conversation, we have some funders, Plan S in Europe, is also going to be mandating scholarly open access to books if their research outputs based on funding. And people, once they find out the wide reach of open access books, they're noticing the impact of that compared to closed access situation with print or ebooks. And so next slide. We have an example here, again, MIT, again, a new open access book that came out just this week. You can look that up online. You can read every chapter. You can read the whole book as a PDF. And this came out for Open Access Week, Reassembling Scholarly Communications, and is touching on these issues of global politics as it relates to open access. Next. And finally here, of course, the other big inequity situation, the other diversity, equity, and inclusion issue is research evaluation practices, both evaluating individual scholars as well as universities. And This has been a very traditional system, and everyone is looking for this system to evolve, to include more researchers, more products of research, and more areas of the world, often referred to as the audit culture, and it is definitely not diverse, equitable, or inclusive. Many are marginalized because it's a domination of rankings. Everybody is fighting to get to the top of the rankings, and this is what matters now. So we have some popular statements and actions listed here, encouraging some of them, Dora, you can be a signatory of. DORA is the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, and that is a move to get away from the journal impact factor as the all-important metric that's used. Leiden Manifesto is a 10-point declaration. And even you'll see, and then there's the metric TIDE, which is really more to focus on responsible metrics. The Hong Kong Manifesto is an example of a recent geographic manifesto for assessing research and focusing on a more local look at it. And then since 2010, we've had this move toward, let's get away from traditional impact measures of people, journals, and universities, and let's move toward using alternative metrics. Alternative metrics are much faster because they catch the impact on the ground as it's happening. And this is now with COVID-19 very important because there's no time to wait really for traditional anything, impact factor, or people are just, they need something current. So this is just kind of a list of efforts at changing this system for research evaluation. Next slide. And so this is Prelights, which is, again, another service highlighting preprints, picking out preprints that are effective and surfacing them and having the ability to comment more on them. And basically also a statement, again, open science saves lives, lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic. And open access, again, what we just discussed, just a huge, for me, very exciting area to be working in and trying to consult with everybody about what to be doing at this point, whether to be building repositories or using new journals or looking at these various metrics. So that's one side of it. But beyond that, it's not only the publication, it's everything else. And open science is essential. And Julie is just going to run through how open science is being affected by COVID-19. Julia?
Okay. So when we think of the open spectrum, we're looking at a range of activities that really started with the open access, and that was really challenged at the time the internet was opened up and became a reality and established itself, at least in educational institutions, in the early 90s. And from that time, we see a series of open movements, and I'm going to concentrate on what open science is. So here's a kind of a, I would say, a very vanilla definition from the Wikipedia, and scientists, organizations, and professional societies have a more focused and probably relevant to their members and stakeholders definition, but they do reflect some of these issues. So the purpose is to make scientific research data and its accompanying data and its dissemination processes all accessible to all levels of an inquiring society, amateur or professional. So we should remember that open access really had its push and initiatives from the medical community, patients, the public at large that wanted access to learn how were medical treatments potentially affecting them as patients in their seeking of cures and solutions to medical dilemmas. And this situation really opened it up because people felt that they were increasingly in control of asking intelligent questions of their providers, their physicians and medical teams, and they could understand better what they could expect to experience as a patient going through a process of healing. So this is the situation that has expanded to all areas of science. And you can see encouraging scientists to practice open notebook science, meaning laboratory work, observation work, whatever kind of study that they were engaged in, and making it easier to publish those results and communicate scientific knowledge, as Laura indicated, with as broad a population as possible. So increasingly, we're not just thinking of a narrow readership, but we're expecting to open those opportunities to society at large. And this has become a mandate now, that not only is it the academic or scientific communities that are so interested in this, but it has impact in our public policy, it has in our lifestyle, and opportunities for product development and consumerism, and just how we live a healthy and productive life. We need to be in the know and aware. So this transparency and building on accessible knowledge is a shared right, and it's a human right. So through collaborative networks, and now we have the technology to reinforce that and to allow for it. So we can also say that there's some related contexts that reinforce this, and it would be issues like sustainability. If we start something, how do we grow it? How do we expand on it? How do we make it sustainable and part of our lifestyle? And this is what we're looking at in the careers of scientists, medics, people in general all over who have that opportunity to open their work up. And it drives future open access models, and it increases them. We're seeing now this is not only Open Access Week today, but today starts National Library Week, and we're seeing the role, even though libraries are physically closed, they're enormously active during the pandemic in providing resources electronically and digitally. And there's a number of activities we'll share in a few more slides that point to that during the pandemic. So these opportunities create and expand more movements, and they also allow for more equity, diversity, and inclusivity opportunities to make human rights at the forefront here. And the intersection with innovation and entrepreneurship is something that I want to sort of conclude with today, that really pushes the next generation for knowledge creation and what that impact is on publishing sectors. So what is most affected by open science? At least the science part of it. It definitely increases and enhances science communication. So as we know, the AAAS, this is one of their activities, this science and technology workshop focusing on human rights. For the last few years, it's been an extension of that science communication on focusing on those topics. And it's, as Laura indicated, it's about impact, and we're extending that to mean different forms of impact that can be measured and pulsed in different ways and from different communities. Those wider collaborations with more partners increases the work of the individual and expands it to forming new communities. And those collaborations break down barriers of discipline, geography, and they're just more inclusive because we're seeing gender better represented. We're seeing people in less developed parts of the world participating, etc. So there's that aspect of it. Then we also see the role of the government changing. And as the government wants to not reinvent the wheel each time with funding, they want to have people share their outputs and build that community within the science and within the subject areas, that they are really mandating more and more data management planning, publication planning, putting things out there, building on previous work rather than just reinventing and reissuing. We want to reduce the barriers across the disciplines because we're seeing much more interdisciplinary, or you want to call it pluralistic or transdisciplinary exchanges. People can't really explore options for policies if they don't understand the basic science. And if we're going to say that we're evidence-based and we're driven by science decisions and let the science dictate our policy, then we need to reduce those barriers and do it in a very transparent way. And faster results, of course, this during the pandemic, we've seen that people can't wait to have an article accepted and then published and then released. I mean, a year would pass. So what we need to do is to release thoughtful ideas that are couched in the science, well documented, and observe that the peer review will come from comments, and people will build a sense of establishing where things are going to go. And we're seeing publishers now observe enormously what's happening in the preprint space, because they're soliciting those papers to be published on fast tracks in their publications. So there's a lot of that activity and intersections that we hadn't seen really up until now. And authors also retain the rights to their work. This is really important, as Laura indicated, because why give it to the funding source? Why give it to the institutional host that's paying your salary? Why give it to the publisher that's perhaps a commercial publisher that is taking care of its stakeholders and investors? It should be back into where the intellectual property resides. And we have to say most science comes with data, so the data has to play by the same rules. We want to promote the use of open source utilities because the research process engages you in many ways, from collecting material to organizing and managing your information, etc. So you can do that. Then the license to publish and to distribute, once you really want to encourage using the Creative Commons attribution license, and there are multiple options within that, because it allows you to retain for reuse and repurposing. And so if you want to use it to teach, or if you want to use it in citing in a future publication, or you want to develop media presence with it or something like that, it allows the author that option, and the user knows exactly what they can do with that material. And it reduces the embargoes of what's available from subscription models. It kind of eliminates that and allows people to post as well as to publish. So it doesn't do away with traditional publishing, but what it does is it gives it a parallel push. And then there are also some assessment measures and usage metrics that we can now fully embrace, with more opportunities in this landscape. And that tells us what are people using because of the availability online. We can measure this. We can also see how they're citing it, not just in the future forms of literature and publications, but in commentary. It's better for journalism and it's more accurate. And then there are multiple social media platforms that participate in promoting this work, and exchanges allowing for discourse, questioning, forums, people to, all kinds of things that can be done using a variety of conferencing techniques. And what we're doing through the pandemic has really opened opportunities to share information more widely. And the hosting options are plentiful right now. They're competitive, but you can deposit through your institutional repository or through a subject-based preprint server. And all of that data and submissions are crawled by search engines, whether you rely or on any specific one, whether it be Google or Yahoo or any series of them. There are they collect this information in open access, so people are getting it out much faster than going through the traditional abstracting and indexing environment. So to understand open science, I would really say you start with the idea or the hypothesis, and you sort of think about how you conduct your research. You have some form of data collection, however it's done, and you clarify those rights and you define that process. And it goes on to what do you do with the results of that data? Having a data management plan is central to this. You have to think about how to describe that data and to create metadata definitions and practices that can that are standardized, that your readers and your users can navigate through and to compare to other resources, etc. You have to think of that as not just available at the time of publication and issue, but you have to think of it for long-term preservation. And now we have lots of cloud options and cloud servers, and we have also part of the publication and distribution has to be able to point to it. And whether we give things a digital object identifier or we give them a different coding, it has to, identify where it's parked. And what is the policy for reuse? As I said, the options for teaching and future curriculum building is one idea, but also to build on it. And what happens when conditions change and there's a new thinking about something? How do you challenge that and build on it without repeating the situation? So this all is summarized, but science is built on replication and sort of a legal mandate of stare decisis. You want it to have a long tail so you can discuss where the origins of it are. So from the point of chronology, we're still looking at history of science, informing what we're doing today with new opportunities, technologies, and mindsets. So here is a another visual aid that was produced by Foster Open Science, which was a output of the European communities, and they just finished their multi-year work. And I'm not sure what their future will be, but you can see this is kind of, I'm sorry if it's not really clear, but you can see how it defines open science from the far left, and it suggests some of the other open movements from open access, open data, to the research process, the evaluation, creating policies, and additional tools. And then each of those multiplies out in various ways, and you see where they're hosted and the role of government, the role of academia, the role of industry, all of this together. And then on the far right, you see some of these areas that Laura began to introduce, the altmetrics. And today they're not so alternative. Several years down the track here, we're seeing them as pretty establishment and mainstream. New forms of bibliometrics and science metrics and webometrics and all kinds of things, and being able to determine how have funders matured in this space, and this creating new ecosystem is the same thing as what's happening from the publishing side or from the libraries who are collecting this material. And you see things like open repositories and open services and tools. All of those are help inform how this can be conducted. And so that's interesting. So that's from the open science. And then